lots of you in the last couple of weeks. It's been lovely to do some collaboration with you.
Thank you. I was hoping you weren't going to say I've seen too much of you.
No, not at all, not at all. So you are my quasi Andrew Priestley today. Ooh. So although you look much prettier. So Andrew and I have been running these quick, short, sharp leadership lives on the lounge for the last couple of months. And really the whole purpose of it was to talk about some leadership challenges. It was to share some insight, share some wisdom. Both Andrew and I work globally. We work with lots of different organizations, corporates, but a lot of smaller to medium-sized businesses. And we see lots of areas that leaders really need either support or guidance or wisdom to share what we see all the time. So we decided to do these leadership lounges every fortnight on a Tuesday. Andrew has left us this week to go and do the Camino Trail, which you just told me before you've actually done already.
Yeah, I did part of it quite a few years ago as one of those big birthday gifts to myself. And it's hard, but it's really, really rewarding. Like you just, at the end of it, you're so grateful and the end is just magnificent. So if anyone is thinking about doing it, absolutely do it.
And why do you do it? Is there what's the significance of it?
I think everyone does it for different reasons, and you get a little booklet at the beginning and you fill out the reason why you're doing it. So some people do it for that spiritual reason or religious reason, which is, the pilgrims used to actually do it as their testament to their God. For me, it was more about creating some space and doing repetitive things over time. It does kind of do your head in, and you can clear a lot of that gunk out. You also meet amazing people. You literally walk along, you say, Buen Camino, and sometimes people will just go, Buen Camino, and keep walking. Other people will want to talk to you, and you just hear all these amazing stories. It's a beautiful thing. It's safe. There's great places to stop, amazing food, everything.
Wow. And, I think a couple of things that really stand out to me, it's an opportunity, I think, for you to stop and reflect. And I talk about this a lot with leaders, the importance of stopping and thinking, taking the time to think. So when you're kind of doing that and you're walking so much, you've got nothing but to do other than to have the thoughts inside you.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I thought everyone would have their little earpods in and listen to music and all that sort of stuff. And at the beginning, people do, but it's actually, you want nothing. You want that stillness. You want that space. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing how Andrew goes when he comes up and tell us some things that he's shared. But today, I want to talk about something that we've been talking about for a little while with the work that we've been doing, but something that you're pretty passionate about, and that is really the bridge to our future leaders. And Andrew talked about it 2 weeks ago, where he said in the year 2030, we're going to have more millennials in the workforce than any other generation, which is, it's kind of, for me, it's one of the things we were talking about is how, if that's the case, then as leaders, what are some of the things that we need to prepare and be ready for with that difference in generations? Because they want something from us that is different to what the baby boomers wanted, or even Generation X as well. So where should we start, Mel?
Oh, look, let's start at the beginning. So I suppose the thing that really made me starting to think was 7 years isn't all that long. So we're 2023, we're nearly 2024. And if in 2030, so 6 years, the vast majority of people that are in the workplace are going to be millennials. And I just know my kids, like I've actually got one child who's a millennial, they're very different. And if we don't spend the next 5 or 6 years and this isn't the sort of thing that we just leave until the last minute and, will everyone change? We need to start thinking about what those differences are, and us as leaders, what does that sort of mean? So just as a really small example, if you think about baby boomers, so just again, I'm not going to stereotype, this is broad generalization, but baby boomers are 1946 to about 1964, okay? So that group of people grew up in this real economic growth sort of period. So there was a fair bit of affluence compared to, the war babies and that sort of thing. They're generally optimistic. They're really motivated by a sense of achievement. But probably the big one from a leadership side of things is that they prefer a traditional style of learning. So like the going to school or the chalk and talk and that sort of thing. Face to face, that sort of thing. Yep. But also too, they do have a tendency to think that their career is one company for life. Yeah. So you work pretty much for one, maybe two companies, but the big one is that you actually get promoted based on seniority. Yeah. So it's not skills or knowledge or anything like that. It's kind of like you've been here for X amount of years. Okay. If we fast forward down to the millennials, which are more of the 1981 to 1996, they're very digital savvy. Makes sense. Yeah. They value experiences. So this is a key difference. So they actually want to experience things for themselves, okay? Whereas our baby boomers were very much trying to get things, the affluence of cherry picking all their good things. The other thing with millennials is they place a really, really high value on work-life balance, okay? Again, the difference when we've got our baby boomers is they have got this concept of going to work, a 9 to 5 job. I turn up, I work, I have to work at least 8 hours. Like that's an expectation. Whereas if we look at millennials, they're very much, I will work a full day, but it might be 4 hours in the morning and I might go to gym for 2 hours and then do another 4 hours in the afternoon, which is a totally different mindset, because we've got baby boomers then going, oh, those young people, they don't put in the effort that I do, but they're just doing it differently. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I know too, I've got some millennials working for me, and it's that flexibility. I think it's that autonomy. It's the, I think that they're very comfortable working remotely too, aren't they? I work with lots of different organizations, and government organizations, private organizations, corporates. And many organizations are now going, well, this is what we need to do because our workforce is demanding it. And we also know that people will leave if they don't get that flexibility or if they don't get that ability to work remotely. So we can't just have this, no, we're not doing it anymore.
Yep, absolutely. And just on that point about millennials are very tech savvy. So anything new that's introduced into the workplace, they're like sponges and they grab it all up.
Yes.
And they do it in their own way and in their own style. Yeah. Previously, we're very chalk and talk. We're going to carve out this time to learn this topic. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Whereas, our younger people, let's just jump on YouTube. Let's learn this for myself. It's not that real, thinking about stages or, building Lego and putting layer upon layer. They'll just go off and teach themselves something just on a whim because they like it.
Well, I think on top of that, and again, this is what I've noticed, especially in organizations, is the millennials want a really clear growth and development plan.
Absolutely.
Okay? They want something to go, right, here is my succession plan, or here is what the next step is for me. This is the projection. This is what we're going to do. So for leaders out there, and I should actually say for any leaders out there that are listening, anyone that's listening to us at the moment, make sure you drop in a comment or contribute to the conversation. If you've got questions, if you've got statements, if you know that what we're saying is resonating with you, pop it into the chat bar and we'll talk about it as well. But they're actually wanting us to have a really clear plan in place. I know many organizations that still only do a development plan once a year.
Yeah, and feedback once a year.
And set and forget. That's your plan.
Yeah.
Whereas with what I find with the millennials is that they want that growth and development. I want a plan in place, but I want you. Had some research the other day that I was sharing with a group of leaders. Millennials want feedback once a week. Once a week. They want praise, they want recognition, they want you're doing good, or here's your gaps, or I need to correct you here. They're wanting that feedback. So if you're not getting it, what we do know is the less feedback you give, the more disengaged they become. And there was some research that I put some stats up the other day that said 40% of employees are disengaged because they're not getting feedback.
Yeah. Yep. And the feedback has to be meaningful. So it can't be sort of like a real sort of flippant, oh, well done, Kylie. Yeah. Like it's got to be, Kylie, you nailed the intro, and why you nailed the intro, for example. Yeah. So it's got to be really specific. The other thing, it's got to be done in a way that is heartfelt and we're connecting. So walking down the corridor going, hey, high five, Kylie, good job, isn't really that connection that they're craving. It's very much, I'm being seen, I'm being heard, because for them, what they want to do is they want some recognition. And this isn't like a needy recognition, and I really don't want to stereotype or do that sort of thing, but it's more about they want to feel that they're making a valuable contribution. I'm part of something big. I'm part of a cause. I'm part of something that's going to make a difference. And I want to passionately engage in that. So I will go off and learn, if I want to, but I want to co-create with you. I want to suck in your wisdom as well. So, those sorts of things are very, very different if we go back to the baby boomers and how they were kind of raised when they were first in the workforce. Because that's the other thing. We are quite conditioned with when we enter the workforce with how we were mentored and how we were taught and what happened when we first started in the workforce. And that conditioning keeps carrying on. So we have to be really careful that whether we entered the workforce 40 years ago or 4 years ago, that conditioning still carries forward. So just because, I remember when I first started work, I was in an industry that was pretty much male dominated. And they made a lot of assumptions. There was only 4% of the workforce were women. So they made a lot of assumptions, and things like, we don't have toilet facilities, so women can't do this job. So there were some of these sorts of things coming in way back then. If I carried that forward, I could be sort of thinking, particular people can't do particular jobs. And that's just based on the conditioning of how I was first brought into the workplace. So going back to baby boomers, the way you got a promotion was basically how long you'd done a job for, not how well you'd done a job, how long you had just done a job for. Now we really are looking at what's your skill base, what are you bringing to the role, not how long have you done a job, but like how big were the projects, what sort of size were they, what was the value of them, what were the challenge that you brought. Yeah. And that's a really different mindset that you're bringing into is this person going to be a good leader or a good fit for that job.
Yes. And correct me if I'm wrong, I was again reading something around millennials. We know that millennials want to have purpose in their work. So, as you say, I'm not just in a call center answering a phone. I'm actually helping a client to be able to make sure that they, have. It could be, if it was the aged care industry, it could be that they have a retirement home that is close to their home, allows for their grandchildren to come in, and a place where they feel like they're not too different to what it used to be once they were in their home. So it's that more I'm helping people to live out their best life for their last few years. That's the purpose we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And I think many organizations don't do this well enough. They make the assumption that, well, don't you know you're doing that? But sometimes people can't get to that level. But I was reading around the Gen Z, which is after the millennials, And what they're talking about there, it's more than that. It's about the environment, or it's about bigger purpose of the world. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you see in that space?
Yeah, definitely. So our Gen Zers are very much kind of like, they're custodians of the next generation of the way the world is. So they want to make sure that the world isn't going to be a worse place when they're sort of like our age type of things. Okay. So they've got a lot of social conscious behind them. They're also egalitarian. So they want to make sure that everyone's got enough of everything. There's not this real, some people are really prosperous and other people are less prosperous. It's sort of, balancing the justice scales, for want of a better term.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're really invested in that real making a difference, making sure that society is, the way they want it to be for the future.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And I was reading the same, and I thought, how do therefore workforces handle that and make sure they're doing it? We've come from a financial services background. We've done a lot of work in the superannuation space. So we see from an advice perspective that many clients actually want to invest in, ethical products and services and solutions. So we see that. So it's nice to see it being transferred over into the workforce. I would love, Mel, for you to be able to share four, if you can come up with 4 things where leaders of today can start to create that workplace satisfaction, so that if they are, or when they are leading millennials or the Generation Z, what they can do that is practical for them to start thinking about it, because we don't want to wait till 2030. We've already got millennials in our mix now. It's what are some of the things that they can start to think about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've hit probably one of the most practical, and I'm going to say easy, but sometimes this isn't easy. It's about those career development opportunities. So talking to your people about, so what is it that, really makes you passionate? What lights you up? What do you want to be part of? And then looking at that career development, and, whether it's you get, they often say now, if you get 2 years out of an employer, you're doing really well. Okay, 2 years. So even if you map out 2 years and that person leaves in 2 years, you're going to get the most engaged and best value out of that employee. So my number one would be, talk about career development, talk about planning, succession, all those sorts of things. But to your other point, why? So how does that career development work with your organization and the why of your organization? So if you can connect them, you might get more than 2 years, you might get 4 years, which would be really awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
I think the other one is to have a think about flexible work arrangements. Now, I know this is always a hot topic and people are talking a lot about hybrid working and working from home and all those sorts of things, but it's not a blanket, everyone does this sort of thing. And this is why, again, having that genuine conversation around, look, I really like doing Pilates at 5:30 on Thursday. Could I leave, work at 4:30 every Thursday or something like that? And having those genuine conversations and building, that a bit of a plan and a bit of flexibility. The other thing is, as leaders, we need to trust our people. We're not micromanaging them. We're not going, Kylie, it's 9 o'clock, have you logged on, or anything like that. It's having that trust, or having those systems and processes in place so that your people are doing their job. Okay.
I think I might add to that one, because what I often find is, especially during COVID and even post-COVID, I've seen many businesses just giving out, this is, you decide, you let us know what days you want to work home, what days you come in, and what. I always say to leaders, it's important that we understand the business needs. What are the business needs? What are our customer needs? Okay. And then what are our team needs? Like if you and I need to work together, collaborative on a regular basis, have open communication, and you want to work at home on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and I want to do Friday and Monday, when do we actually get together? So it's not just what do they need, but it's what do we as a business need, and then how can we work together to give them what they need?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And this is where I think those genuine conversations, and sometimes they can be awkward. You know, people don't really like talking about that sort of stuff, but I think, I know, so do I. But I think the more genuine you are, and it's more about, we want to work together, we're co-creating, we're building this workplace together. So, all right, I know we're very short on time, so just two others. I think the other one is look at technology, okay? Yeah. So our millennials, and, you know, I'm a Gen Whiner, so I'm not great at technology, but these younger people are really savvy with technology. Fill their boots, let them do all those sorts of things, obviously within the security mantles, but, you know, embrace it. And also let them teach us. That's a great way to sort of help that collaboration in the workplace.
Yeah.
Last but not least is the old positive work environment. And this is where, back to your point before, you need team collaboration. You know, even if you do have hybrid working, what are those things that you can do? Like, do you all just sit around and have lunch on Zoom together, or something or other? It's not all worky. It's those other things. And I love seeing on LinkedIn, you know, when people have their social day for the year and they go and help wrap Christmas presents, or they go and work at Oxfam, or they do those sorts of things. They're the sorts of things that really our new generations are passionate about, and they will give 150% in the rest of their workplace if they think that the workplace is supporting them in those other social endeavours. So
beautiful. So 4, I'm just going to restate them for everyone that's listening, and then we've got a question coming through. So provide opportunities for career development. Make sure you've got that in place. Offer those flexible working arrangements. Collaborate, communicate, have transparency around the needs of the business and the needs of the team. Use technology, and then finally create that workplace culture, that positive workplace culture, because they thrive it, don't they? They thrive with that connection. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, face-to-face. It can be different ways we can use what we're doing now. There's a question.
And it doesn't have to be costly as well. People sort of think bringing the team together is going to cost a fortune and you've got to feed them. And like, the simplest things are generally the things that are most memorable and meaningful.
Yeah, for sure. And we see it a lot in lots of different businesses that we work with. It might be just bringing in a morning tea, or it might be doing some shout outs, or it might be, you know, having a couple of drinks on a Friday afternoon, or whatever, a cup of tea, but it doesn't matter what it is. What we've got to do as leaders is we've got to provide the opportunity for those connections. You can't create that culture without it. I'm seeing lots of reactions coming through, but there's a question that I want to just ask you, okay? Well, not me, but it's coming through. Without stereotyping, how do you know, and you might have actually answered this already, but how do you know what your workforce might want?
Yeah. So you might get a bit of a feel for, you know, people's age, because, you know, they're talking about 21st or 30s and those sorts of things. So you could sort of get a bit of a feel for that. But absolutely talk to your HR business partner, or if you're a smaller firm, have a look at some of your HR data and have a look where those areas are. But back to that point around having those conversations on career development, that's going to be your key. So if the people are talking about, you know, social enterprises and I want to get involved in those sorts of things, you're probably dealing more with your millennials, that sort of thing. Whereas your Gen Yers, for example, they're going to probably be not quite as socially enterprising. What's my word there? Yeah. So my big caveat is just be really careful that we're not lumping everyone into a big sort of group. There's always going to be tailoredness to it, but you know, think about the younger generation love technology. They want the feedback. They want to feel meaning. They want to come to work and have meaning and walk away at the end of the day being really satisfied that they've contributed something.
Yeah, I feel like when I hear you say that, I think about that culture check-in, you know, that bit of a bit of a pulse check on how are we as a culture? How are we around feedback? How are we at celebrating successes? How are we at fostering a sense of community around development plans? People could, the leaders that are listening going, how do I actually do this? Well, Mel's made some really great points around having those conversations and doing that check-in, but you can also do a survey. You can do a monkey survey where you can just ask, 5, 6, 7 questions and just kind of get a gauge. Okay. And then once you've got that gauge, it might be that they have this real sense of community and they have this opportunity to have career development, but they might not have enough feedback, or you might not be celebrating successes. So as leaders out there, get a bit of a check on this, because if you don't now, okay, you will lose them to others that will move on as well.
One little tip that I'm going to throw in there is I love doing the post-it note check-in, and whether you're face-to-face or online or stuff, it's just, you're waiting for everyone to come into the Zoom, or you're waiting everyone to come into the physical space. Grab a post-it note and just with one word, how are you going? Because it's a way of actually getting a pulse of the room. And if you've got a couple of people who are sort of like maybe just had a sad smiley face or something like that, to check in with those people later on. It's giving you a real sense of what's going on in your team, and it's a way to start some of those conversations. But it's also a good way for the group to kind of go, I'm celebrating a birthday, or it just helps with that positive vibe. But it's simple, it's easy. If it's a Zoom meeting, you can sort of do the thumbs up, smiley face, or find an emoji, or put in the chat, how you're feeling in a GIF, or, just do something creative like that, just to how people are going.
Thanks, Mel, for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. So this is really, for everyone that's listened, thank you. This is really an opportunity for you to start to think about what your workforce looks like now, or being prepared for what it's going to look like in 2030, where you're going to have majority of those people that are going to be millennials, okay, that are going to need you differently as a leader. So I hope this has given everyone some insights and some takeaways that they can start to think about for their business and for their teams. So thanks, Mel, for your time. And
thank you very much for the invitation. I look forward to hearing about the Camino trip and all the interesting talks.
Beautiful. Thanks.